One of the experiences I trust every homebrewer shares is the feeling of awe that comes from witnessing the conversion of wort into beer through the fermentation process. Even after 15 years, I still get giddy when I see the first signs of airlock activity, a nice fluffy kreuzen developing on top of my beer. The worst is when this takes too long. You all know the anxiety that comes from checking on a batch a day after pitching and seeing no action. This is why we love Imperial Yeast, who pack 200 billion cells of the purest yeast into each pitch right pouch, which assures quick starts, healthy fermentation, and predictably great results. I strongly urge all of our listeners to check out everything Imperial Yeast has to offer and let them know that you appreciate their support of the Brülosophy podcast while you're at it. All right, on to the show. Hey everybody, we made it another 10 episodes. This is 360 altogether, which means it's time for another Brü A. I'm your host, Marshall Schott, and today I'm joined by contributor Will Lovell to answer a bunch of questions submitted by listeners of the show.
Yeah, as I told you at the top of, before we got started recording, I actually really love these episodes that we do together. I love when we get these Brü As. I love you guys putting in questions and giving us something to spitball and talk about. So just keep them coming. I think these are some of the best episodes that we do, and I really enjoy recording them.
Yeah, I say it every Brü A episode that these are some of my favorite episodes as well, and there's multiple reasons for that. One, I feel like in 36 Brü A episodes, which is over 360, if you we average about 10 questions per episode. That's a lot of questions we answered. I feel like we haven't really gotten two of the same question yet. Maybe we haven't. I just don't remember, which would be perfectly plausible given where I'm at in my age and my life. But I'm with you. They're just so much fun. We've got such clever questions that come in, and what I've been noticing is a trend of people asking questions that aren't so much about beer, which is going to happen in this episode. Now, one of the many benefits of being a patron of Brülosophy is that we often ask them for show ideas as well as prioritizing their questions for these Brü A episodes, which is what we're going to be doing today. So if you're wondering how to become a patron or perhaps have no idea what I'm even on about, patrons are those people who appreciate what we're doing enough to support us over at patreon.com/Brülosophy, where by making a small monthly pledge anywhere from $1 to $15 per month, they receive rewards like access to unpublished contributor recipes, unique discounts at YakimaValleyHops.com, and an invitation to a monthly live Q&A session with somebody in the brewing world. Coming up later this month, December of 2024, Brülosophy's Alex Shanks Abel will be hanging out with patrons and answering questions. In addition to their role as a contributor to Brülosophy, where they brew and write about experiments, the Hop Chronicles, Short and Shoddy, and such, Alex has played an integral role, along with you, Will, in the Brew Lab, in the Brew Club, where they serve on the leadership team. Alex has also been a guest on the Brülosophy show, where they've talked about things such as brewing like a cheapskate. This is going to be a fun session. Trust me on that one. To be part of it, be sure to make your pledge of just $3 or more by Saturday, December 28th, as Alex is going to be taking questions that Sunday, the 29th. All past sessions are stored on our private Patreon and Facebook pages, so patrons can go back and watch them whenever they like. Learn more about all of the rewards we offer for your support and become a patron today over at patreon.com/Brülosophy. Another really easy way to support us is by using the links found at brülosophy.com/support when you're shopping online. Your shopping experience won't change at all, and we get a tiny little kickback for the referral that helps us to continue producing this show. And finally, if you wouldn't mind, please take a few seconds to leave a rating and review of this show in Apple Podcast or wherever it is you listen to podcasts, as it helps those who may not be familiar with us to more easily find the show. Massive thanks to everybody who has already taken this couple of minutes to do that. Feedback is brought to you by Clawhammer Supply, who are known for their incredible all-in-one electric brewing systems. I brewed on both their 120 and 240 volt systems, and I'm telling you, these things are legit, efficient, easy to use with a relatively small footprint. You're not going to be disappointed with one of these units. Plus, the guys behind the company run an amazing YouTube channel, which you can find by searching YouTube for Clawhammer Supply. If you're in the market for electric brewing gear or even just reasonably priced kettles and such, make sure to check out what Clawhammer Supply has to offer at clawhammersupply.com. And don't forget to let them know Brülosophy sent you when you're checking out. That's clawhammersupply.com. Listener Bob Puranaj, I believe is how you say it, wrote in with some detailed feedback after listening to episode 355, where we focused on smoked malts and Rauch beer. This is a bit longer than usual, but because you are co-hosting, Will, I felt it was apropos, as they say. Bob says, I'm a fan of Rauch beer and have been to Bamberg yearly since 2000. I'm laughing for a reason. You'll see why. A couple of points. First, Rauch beer is smoked beer. Rausch beer would be, quote, intoxicating beer, which is unintentionally funny, but doesn't exist, as a style at least. Next, besides Beechwood and Oak, Schlenkerla brews Weichel beer or Weichsel beer. I'm trying to pronounce this right because he put like pronunciations in his email. Weichsel beer with cherry smoked malt, and Weichsel is a type of sour cherry. This is their version of Rot beer. Don't get me started on that mispronunciation. It is not rot beer, he says. Nothing rotten about it. I was on the hunt for Rot beer in the summer of 2023, which suddenly was all the rage, at least in Bavaria, and I went to Schlenkerla in Bamberg, where the lines were longer than usual. This was July 23rd, the day for the preservation of Rauch beer. Schlenkerla chose that day to introduce its Rot beer Weichsel, a smoked version of the traditional style. They also introduced a smoked Schwarzbier around the same time. It was made with alder smoked malt, and it was nice. Anyway, I believe you both aim for correctness, so I had to overcome my hesitance to cringe, but Will was right on Rauch versus Rausch. Also, the city is pronounced Bamberg. Cringe itch quelled, he says. Thank you both for actually producing this podcast. I've heard pretty much all of them, and this one led me to the keyboard, so well done. And you're correct about the results received when entering Rauch beer in a competition. I gave up years ago wasting precious bottles of my ham-infused nectar. What say you, Will?
I do agree that it is Rauch beer, and I hear people pronounce it Rausch beer all the time. And, you know, in the end of the day, it's kind of like Bamberg versus Bamberg. Is it worth correcting? You know, obviously, if it's making your eyes twitch, I appreciate the email. I will try to notate that forward going on with Bamberg instead of Bamberg. But Bamberg is so much more fun to say. That's all I really get there. And, you know, I would love to dive into all the Schlenkerla beers that are out there. I haven't tried them all because I don't do your yearly pilgrimage. I'm super duper jealous. I wish I could do a yearly pilgrimage to Germany, anywhere in Germany, but specifically Bamberg would be amazing. Like their downtown, their Altstadt is so beautiful. So I'm super jealous, but they do all sorts of cool things. Their owner is such a amazing and kind of very historically thinking guy that it's really cool to see what they're doing all the time. And so anytime I can give love to Schlenkerla on the show, I will. And anytime I give love to Rauch beer on the show, I totally will. And so I really appreciate the positive feedback and the corrections, as it were. And I will try to notate that in the back of my mind going forward.
Well, I think you were more correct than I was, Will. So I'm the one who I think Bob is calling out here. And as a fellow pedant, I'm totally cool with it. I appreciate when I'm saying something wrong, and somebody calls me out. I don't feel like an idiot for them calling me out. I feel like an idiot for saying it wrong in the first place. So the correction is much, much appreciated. And I would encourage anybody out there, when we do something wrong, we say something that's off, let us know. We'll correct ourselves. I will say that when I first got into, home brewing and delving into or obsessing really about the various styles of beer, and I learned about Rauch beer, I called it Rauch beer. I was corrected by a local buddy of mine who loves Schlenkerla specifically, but Rauch beer. And he said, "You're saying it wrong. It's Rausch beer." So I cannot wait to nail him to the wall on this one. And I absolutely will be doing that in a friendly way, of course. Now, I love when we get feedback again from people who are smarter than us. So thank you, Bob. I've never taken a class on the German language at all. So I appreciate the pronunciation lessons, though I probably still screwed them up in my reading of your email there. And I apologize for that. Either way, I'll continue to do my best on that front. In the same way, I'll continue not brewing or drinking much Rauch beer because it's just not my thing. Thanks again, Bob. If you have show feedback, you can send it to feedback@brulosophy.com or leave us a note on social media. Alrighty, when we return from this break, answers to your questions.
Got great ideas, but no idea how to build a website? Get Bluehost. Their AI design tool creates high-quality WordPress sites super fast. Whether you're a blogger, influencer, or launching a side hustle, Bluehost helps boost your growth with built-in marketing and e-commerce tools. Upgrade to cloud and get 100% uptime and 24/7 security to stay online all the time. Why wait? You've got the vision. Make it real. Visit Bluehost.com to get started.
As every brewer knows, the best beer requires the best hops, which Yakima Valley Hops provides fresh from the source to brewers around the world, carrying everything from classics like Cascade to modern favorites like Galaxy and Mosaic, as well as other ingredients and gear. Yakima Valley Hops has it all. And don't forget to check out their new podcast, The Late Edition, where the YVH crew goes into depth on our favorite plant with industry experts. Head over to YakimaValleyHops.com now to see all they have to offer and subscribe to The Late Edition wherever it is you listen to podcasts.
Hey, football fans, ready to add some extra excitement to your game day? Dive into Chumba Casino, where the thrill of the game greets you every day and the action never stops. It's completely free to play, no purchase necessary. Whether you're tailgating, cheering from your couch, or on the go, Chumba Casino brings the excitement right to your fingertips. Play anytime, anywhere, with hundreds of casino-style games, including thrilling social casino slots and classic blackjack, and new games released every week. There's something for everyone to enjoy. Plus, take advantage of generous free daily login bonuses and a fantastic free welcome bonus to kickstart your fun. Chumba Casino is your ultimate playbook for nonstop entertainment. Make every day a Chumba day and join the action now and play for your chance to redeem some serious prizes. With Chumba Casino, the fun never ends. What are you waiting for? Dive into the action today with Chumba Casino and make your game day unforgettable. Join us at ChumbaCasino.com today. No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 18 plus. T&Cs apply.
Look around. You can find cars like these on AutoTrader. Like that car riding your tail. Or if you're tailgating right now, all those cars doubling as kitchens and living rooms are on AutoTrader too. Are you working out and listening to this ad at the same time? Well, multitasking pro, cars like the ones in the gym parking lot are for sale on AutoTrader. New cars, used cars, electric cars, maybe even flying cars. Okay, no flying cars, but as soon as they get invented, they'll be on AutoTrader. Just you wait. AutoTrader.
Huge thanks to everyone who submitted questions to us. These Brü A episodes would not be possible without you, and particularly these ones where we're focusing on questions submitted by our patrons. This whole show wouldn't be possible without you guys, so thank you so much. We're going to kick this off with a question sent in by patron Quentin Keats, who says, my 4 friends and I started homebrewing in 2019 and we're all in by 2021. We each had our own all-grain systems, kegs, stock of grains, and hops, and our brewing chat group was blowing up daily. We were brewing together, entering contests, and having regular beer tasting meetups. Fast forward to present time, and our chat group is basically silent, just a couple of posts every now and then. I've only brewed like 4 times this year. My buddies only brewed a few times as well. I don't know what it is, but even our homebrew club has slowed down considerably. I don't want to be that guy who's selling off my brewing gear just because it's easier to buy a couple craft beers than to make it myself. So what's your advice on beating this brewing slump? I think, Will, you and I, having been in this thing for as long as we have been, know exactly what Quentin's talking about, and we have addressed this on past episodes. But I'm curious, let's kind of delve into more specifically the experience that Quentin, who doesn't want to stop brewing but is kind of in this slump, where he's at with that.
Oh, I have actually been there myself. A tale as old as time, as it were. So I don't know. I do know this, that sometimes, even if I'm not in the mood to brew, if I just set aside time, there's like things that are comforting to it. So I would say just, some ideas to find what motivates you about brewing. Like, is it the process? Because to me, even if I'm like really busy and I'm trying to make something work because of my velocity schedule or something, I know that if I just set aside time and as soon as grain hits hot water and I'm mashing in, like all of a sudden, like the process is just comforting to me. Like I just enjoy the process. Now the stress to get to that point, there's some overcoming for me personally, but like once I get into it, like I'm there. Obviously, experimentation is something that when I've gotten into slumps is driving me, and obviously that's a lot of what we do. But maybe you don't have to go crazy philosophy blind triangle tests, but maybe you can do things like mix it up, try out new ingredients, do like split batches with 2 yeasts. Maybe you have a recipe that you really love that you just want to play around to try to perfect. Try with that experimentation, because that can kind of bring you out of slump, or at least get you thinking about things in a different way to motivate you. Because when I was trying to perfect, I think it was an amber lager recipe a few years ago, I was like really just obsessed. I brewed that recipe like I forget how many times that summer, because every time I like brewed a batch, I would taste it and have this new idea of what I wanted to do with the next one, just to kind of tweak some other little flavor out of. Yeah. Another thing is comfort zones. So like if you want to get out of your comfort zone, like crank out some short and shotties. If you're a traditional logger guy, start doing some short and shoddy loggering, do some things to kind of push you out of your comfort zone, push them out fast. That kind of helps me too. Like if I have to wait 6 months for something to be ready, like I do with my Belgians, that's not always something that's going to bring me into wanting to brew more. So like do something, crank it out, and like make a goal to crank a logger out in under a week or something, and maybe that will help you. And then, of course, if there's competitions are your thing, and that's what motivates you, you can go to the Master Homebrewers program or find a local circuit and try to like, use that as like your jump start. I will totally go after some hardware sometimes just to kind of get out of a slump. And then lastly, it sounds to me like one of the issues you have too is the group of buddies you have aren't also as active, and you're not getting kind of the same involvement. And so I will take this opportunity to totally plug the Brew Club, because we are an online group. And so it's a lot of people from around the country. And so you can get on Facebook and look for the BRU Club. And we're on there. If you don't have Facebook, you can always email me, will@brewlosophy.com, and I can get you a link to the Discord channel. Our Discord channel is kind of where it's at. It's really active. There are people on there every day posting about things. So if you really want kind of that every day, somebody putting a message on your phone, as it were, about brewing and brewing ideas and things like that, like the Average Brew series, great way to get out of a slump, at least to make you brew once a quarter, something that you may not always brew. Some of the cool sponsorship opportunities and cool opportunities we have with sponsors that give us cool ingredients to try out. Just those are things that are kind of perks of being a part of the Brew Club, and it's free for entry. So, there is a paid tier, but you don't need to do that if you don't want to. And so it's free for entry otherwise. So just come on and check it out. If that kind of community is what you're looking for, there is at least one online. And then, hopefully your homebrew club can also kind of, speed up a little bit or get a little more active locally as well.
Yeah, you hit on so many of the what I'm going to term kind of the granular points of ways to keep yourself motivated to stay in a hobby. I'm gonna go a little bit more let's call it brewlosophical, if you will, on how I've been viewing this, basically since the start. And for me to take it to its root level, what gets somebody going in a hobby in the first place is interest, right? We know that. What brings somebody to a point to where they start to that interest wanes, right? To me, there are various reasons when it comes to brewing your own beer in your garage at home, where you're producing this consumable product, that you like to share with people most of the time, that you like to consume yourself. What makes the interest wane? There's always a reason. There's a kernel of a reason there, right? And when you can identify what that reason is, you can kind of massage it into something that becomes understandable. Okay, so I don't mean to go off too far into the weeds on this, but I'll break it down a little bit. A big thing over the last 4 or 5 years that I've noticed is health concerns, right? I just saw a stat that the majority age of homebrewers right now is between 35 and 45 years, which both you and I fall, Will. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, everybody on the Brewlosophy crew falls in that age range. So it makes sense. Like on a palpable level, we understand that. Well, as we get older, we know that we have to be a little bit more cognizant about our health, right? So drinking beer has never been something that doctors are encouraging people to do. Well, let's not lie to ourselves. We know that it's not the healthiest of things. But if that's your reason for waning interest, which I can relate with, right? I was brewing 20 to 30 gallons a month 10 years ago when Brewlosophy got off the ground. Now, because of Brewlosophy, and I'm going to get to this one in a minute as well, and the time that it takes, I don't brew anywhere near as much as that. Now, I obviously stay heavily involved because of Brewlosophy, and that gives me, again, another reason. But if it was specifically health, we know, talk to Alex, they like to brew lower alcohol beers, and they come up with all of these techniques for doing that. That in and of itself can reignite that interest is, what can I do? What can I make that is lower in alcohol? How can I work towards perfecting a good, even near beer or non-alcoholic beer? Again, now you've got a new spark and there's something to roll with there. Let's say it's a time crunch and, spending 6 hours in your garage, even once a month on a Saturday or a Sunday just isn't in the cards. Now you can go and say, well, what can I do to shave some time off of a brew day? Can I try short and shoddy? Maybe that works for me, baby. And maybe that reignites that spark. Whatever it is, I feel like if we stop paying attention to how do we bring new people in, and we shift our focus a little bit to how do we keep people doing this in a way that fits with their lifestyle. I think it's important to bring new people in, but we've talked about this a lot, Will. I think that's going to be in the hands of the people who are interested in beer in the first place. And our work on that needs to take a big 100-foot step back and say, okay, do we want to keep dissing, big beer the way that we have for the last 20 years? Or do we want to view those people who are drinking Bud Miller Coors as the next folks who could potentially be making that style of beer in their garages and then branch out into craft styles? That's my take on that. But if we focus on, how can we reignite that spark that we all felt, those first few batches when it was magical for us to make this wort and to pitch that yeast and to watch it turn into beer, you got to find something else, because once you get used to it, you're just used to it. And I think sadly, but I think the word that best fits here is it gets boring. If you're not doing it for some other reason than just drinking beer, it's going to get boring fast. For me personally, I've found massive amounts of meaning in taking what beer is and talking about it, writing about it, producing content that I'm hopeful is encouraging people to keep doing this thing. Do I brew as much? No way. There's no way. But I'm coordinating it. I'm talking about it. I'm designing it. We're doing all of these things. And I think that's what keeps me involved. And you got to find something. If you love to write, brew a batch, take pictures, and throw it up on a blog. Even if 20 people a month read it, you're doing something external that keeps you interested in the hobby and feels like it keeps it going. That's my take. Maybe I'm way off on that, Will.
I don't think you're way out in left field. I think that's probably a good take on it as well. Just make it fit into your life, I think, is the biggest takeaway I got on that, because there's so many ways that we can make it go sideways. Anyways, our next question is from Paul Johnson. What's the current thinking on hop spiders? Yay or nay?
I love short questions, and watch, we're going to have these big, long responses to it. I don't use hop spiders for the most part. When I first started brewing, when I was doing the extract with steeping grains, I was told by the person at the homebrew shop to put your hops in a hop bag so that they don't make their way to the fermentation vessel. We've done umpteen experiments on stuff like that seem to indicate it doesn't really matter. The very first experiment that I did comparing a batch where the kettle hops were added to a bag, a muslin bag, versus just free floating in the wort, did come back significant. I thought that was fascinating. Even I could tell them apart, which is surprising to some. So I stopped using bags at that point. And again, I don't even know if we had those beers tested by Oregon Brew Lab at the time. But we've since done more on stainless steel mesh hop spiders. And I think the consensus, and maybe you'll disagree, Will, but I think the general consensus is do what works for you. If you're using hop spiders and you seem to be sensing that you're getting less hop character or less hop bitterness, then use a little bit more hops. If you seem to be getting more, use a little bit less, and then just learn the language of your system and speak to it that way. To me, it's like, who cares? As long as you're making beer that you like, just follow your routine. And that's the best way. If you have a baseline to work from, that's the best way to develop recipes. It's also why, and we've talked about the brewer's thumbprint in the past many times, but it's also why you're making an excellent beer on your system at your house with your water and your hop spiders, as it were. If you give that recipe to somebody else, chances are, I'd bet money that it's going to taste different, because there's so many factors that go into a batch of beer. One of them being, the equipment that you're using and the process that you employ. So my thinking on it is, if it's working for you and it's better for your system to filter out those hops in the kettle, then do it. If not, then don't do it. And again, run from your baseline, knowing what using that setup that you have is going to produce.
So I am a big fan of hop spiders, but mostly out of what feels like necessity. I have 2 Delta all-in-one systems that I'm brewing on. In fact, one of the cool things when I unpackaged those Delta all-in-ones is that they both came with a hop spider, which is pretty awesome.
Yeah.
A lot of them you have to buy that extra. So it's a stainless steel little mesh hop spider. But I feel like because of the pump, and the fact that the pump is down there at the bottom, and if you just throw loose hops in there, you're going to be sucking that hop material in through that pump when you go through your whirlpool stage on cooldown. And so to me, I feel like if you're going to use that pump specifically in whirlpool, you need to have some kind of filtration so you're not like clogging up your pump during the middle of it. And there is nothing worse than getting a clogged pump and then just having to, in the middle of a brew session, like hook up like a silicone tube to it and try to like blow it back through. Like it's so weird. And there's like, usually it's really hot liquid and it's just not very safe. So I use them more as a matter of like utility, because I feel like, especially with the all-in-one systems and how those are set up, that it is beneficial anyways to keep as much of that hot particulate out as humanly possible.
Yeah, there's a reason that most of these all-in-one systems come with a hop spiders, because they are using things like pumps or counterflow chillers of some sort, whether that's a plate or a tube counterflow chiller. I don't use those. And so that's what I mean by doing what works best for your setup, right? For my setup, I'm still using a Jaded Brewing, King Cobra, or I believe they call it the Mantis, immersion chiller, copper immersion chiller. Well, in my kettle, the kettle that I have, that immersion chiller won't go in the kettle if there's a hop spider in the way. Since I'm not using a pump, I don't really care. I can let the hop particulate matter settle out to the bottom of the kettle before racking the wort off. So for me, it's kind of inconsequential whether I use one or not. Now, maybe it has an impact on beer character. That was kind of the focus of my first response. And that's what I meant by just adjust. If you feel like you're getting less hop character, then throw more hops in. Now, speaking of electric all-in-one systems, patron Mark Rose, he asked a couple of questions. The first one, he says, in your opinions, can an all-in-one electric brewing setup create wort that is as good or better than an exhaustive 3-vessel rig with or without sparging? Will, I have a feeling I know your response to this question.
Yes. Move on.
Yes, it absolutely does. I fully agree with you.
Yes. So there's a lot of ways to make wort, and I've had some great beers done on 3-vessel rigs. I've had some great beers done on electric all-in-ones. I've had some great beers done on stovetop brew in a bag. There's lots of ways to make wort. There's lots of ways to get the job done. I feel like 3 vessels do a great job to mimic like what the pros do, but just because you're trying to mimic the big boys doesn't mean you're making better or worse beer. So to me, electric all-in-one with no sparge, I've been making great beers. This last year, I probably entered more competitions than I ever have in any previous year, and I've gotten more hardware than any previous year, all made basically with no sparge, electric all-in-one, methods. So yeah, absolutely. Yes.
Well, so here's the thing. Bias is strong. We talk about bias all the time. It's kind of one of the things Brewlosophy is known for. One of the logical fallacies that is very common in brewing, right, is what we refer to as the appeal to antiquity. The way things have always been done. Why change it? That's obviously the best way. They must have settled on, 3-vessel fly sparge or continuous sparge setups because that was what produced the best beer. That's a huge jump from what really happened, and we do that to validate why we chose the method that we do. And then if I come in, Will, if you're a 3-vessel fly sparger and I come in and I say, I'm an Australian who just throws a bag and some wort and does a full volume, no sparge. And I'm like, hey, my beer is just as good as yours. Well, I'm putting in, the cognitive dissonance there. I've put in so much effort, or you, Will, has put in so much effort into this, convoluted 3-vessel setup, all to be told that you could shave off, thousands of dollars in a couple of hours on a brew day and produce equally as good a wort. You don't want to believe that because you've invested so much in this approach, but that's just human nature. So the truth of the matter is this: if you go to most modern brew houses, they are electric setups. I mean, there's really not much of a difference in the way that they're brewing than the way that we do, sans volume. And maybe they're doing fly sparging still, but that is for efficiency's sake. And by efficiency, I'm not just referring to like mash efficiency. I'm referring to total, business efficiency. Is that the size of their mash tuns, in order to get the volume that they need, they've got to fly sparge because it won't all fit. Well, we don't have that limitation as brewers, if we don't want it at least. So you can do a full volume no sparge, and maybe you're going to lose a couple of points in terms of mash efficiency or brew house efficiency by doing that. But for us, it's nominal. It doesn't really matter that much. It's maybe $1 or $2. Now, if it does, you can do a fly sparge on an electric all-in-one if you want to. You just have to figure out the way that you want to go about doing that. Totally possible on something like a claw hammer setup. I believe the Delta, again, makes it very easy as well to do that. So the question about quality, I feel, is rooted in this appeal to antiquity, in this, how can it be good when you're spending so much less effort making it compared to these people who were homebrewing on these crazy fly sparge setups just 10, 15 years ago? Look, there's a big amount of subjectivity when it comes to what we think about things. But if you were blinded to a pale ale that was made on a 3-vessel, 6-hour fly spar rig versus one made on a 4-hour or maybe even 2-hour short and shoddy all-in-one setup, I have a feeling you're probably not going to be able to, pick which one you like more at the very least. Maybe they'll taste different, but the preference for which one is going to be, in the hands of the mouths, I guess, of the people drinking it. So the second question from Mark was, the AHA was big news not long ago. I'm curious if there are any updates or changes since the podcast that discussed the state of the AHA a few months ago. Here's the thing. I haven't received many updates. I did hop on the line with Julia Hertz who's the ED of the AHA right now. And again, nothing but respect for her and what she's doing. I'm not going to let that get in the way of me being honest about my opinions about what's going on in brewing and with the AHA and the BA. And I feel like we've received a lot of comments from people. In fact, I believe the feedback on last week's episode really addressed what I'm going to say now, which is this idea that Julia got put in this position from the Brewers Association, almost to kind of right the ship, right? To hopefully save this sinking thing. That's how I view it. And I'm sure they don't view it that way or won't publicly say that they do. But the reality is I was a member for a decent amount of time. I got some good stuff out of the AHA that you talked about this recently, Will, with me as well, that I'm just not getting out of it anymore. So what's the state of things with the AHA? I really don't know. It's not something that I'm keeping my thumb too heavily on the pulse. And I feel like month by month, it gets less and less that I'm paying much attention to it at all. But like I said in a recent episode, my hope would be that they're able to recover and make it a thing for homebrewers to want to be a part of, to really boost homebrewing in the state, in the United States and even abroad. But right now it's not looking like that's the direction that it's going. But again, fingers crossed, I'm hopeful.
Yeah, I haven't, we did that one podcast and it was all kind of big news because of, HomebrewCon being moved to the GABF. And full disclosure, I did not go to GABF. From what I saw and from some of the promises that were made, the award ceremony was kind of more on a side stage and a little more lackluster than, the main stage that was promised originally. And so there was a lot of kind of weird things going on. So, and to my knowledge, I don't think they've announced what's going to happen for 2025 exactly. I haven't seen anything on it. But I'm not actively looking at the AHA's website every day trying to figure things out. So I think my membership lapsed last month and I don't really have any intention or desire to renew it unless they want to throw me some freebies, then I'll do it. But I really don't need it. And so to me, it's just I don't know. It's not something I want them to make turnarounds on a lot of these things. I hope they can right the ship. I hope things can change. But right now I don't know what the future is. And even if they told me what was going on, I would imagine it would be a little bit more fluid than whatever they were saying. So,
well, yeah. And that's the thing, is the, I don't want this to come across as being too pejorative, but the seeming lack of transparency in the stuff that's going on with the Brewers Association and the AHA, that's really kind of a turnoff to me. I try to live my life on a personal level as honest, transparent and with integrity as possible. And I feel like that's not a value system a lot of bigger organizations share. And that's understandable, whatever. Recently I feel that the A or the BA really has been kind of clumped in with that. And I might get shit for saying that publicly. And I'm not, again, it's not intended to diss people. I want our listeners to understand where we're at. And so I'm answering questions submitted by people that we really care about, our patrons and our listeners. And that's just the state of my thinking about it right now. And again, it's not a single person. You know, I do think that it's good that the CEO is out now, because I feel like that was a big, detriment to the whole organization from the Brewers Association down. And hopefully that some good can come from that. But again, we're not saying don't be a member of the AHA, just because we're not, and I mentioned it recently that I'm currently on like a promotional membership that they offered me. And I do think that there's some element of like, well, maybe if we give this to Marshall, he'll promote us again. I'm not going to do that, because I would feel bad if people went and did that and got nothing out of it. You know what I mean? And I'm not going to encourage people to go spend their hard-earned money on something that at least for me, again, anecdotally, I'm getting very little from when I spend my money on it these days. And that's where they need to, put the rubber needs to meet the road on developing elements of their organization that benefit the people who are paying to keep it alive. That's how these organizations are supposed to work. So I'll leave it there, Will.
Yeah, but I think that's a good spot to kind of end on. And I obviously agree with you on a lot of that stuff. But we'll segue over to Jim now, who has a question for us. Hi, Jim. Thanks for writing in. It says, I've got a closet of brewing equipment, some that I've used all the time and some I've used maybe once. What are your least / never used gadgets, and how much has been offloaded or gifted to your buddies?
So much over the years. And we're in a unique position where, there was a time when we were at that pinnacle of homebrewing popularity. I'd come home from my regular job and there'd be boxes on my front porch. I don't know how they got my address. Businesses out there just expecting that, if we give them free stuff, they're going to review it and promote it. We have very, very, very strongly resisted that. We are not, you go to YouTube now and you're going to see awesome people all reviewing the same stuff at the same time. And you'll notice that we don't do that. That's not something that as a business that I ever wanted to get into. But there was a lot of stuff that I received where I'm like, well, I guess I'll give it a shot, that I used once or twice. And it was like, all right, I'm going to message the folks who sent it to me, let them know that I'm not going to tear them down. It just didn't work for my setup. I've tried a couple different, I'm not going to name names, but I've tried a couple different of the digital or like smart hydrometers. And I know that we've got people on the Brewlosophy crew currently who love them. Not a fan of them. To me, it was just too disengaged from the process. And I also like to taste my fermented beer out of the fermenter. And so I was getting in there to take samples anyways. And so that was a big one that I gave away to some folks. I never sell anything that's quote gifted to us from sponsors or anything. I always give it away. And I tell the sponsors when I'm doing that, just to keep it real. So that was one of them. Let's see what else. There was a time where we had a whole bunch of, do you remember back in I'm sure you were brewing during the days of, you have to make a starter to make good beer. Really the talk about that whole talk was mostly just, hey, pitch rates are low in commonly available, at the time at least, lab yeast packets. So make sure that you're propagating your yeast so you have enough, a good enough pitch rate to actually ferment this beer the way you want it to. These days, with imperial yeast especially, we've got access to fresh pouches that you can just pitch directly. We've shown that hundreds of times at this point. But back in the day, I ended up having 6 different stir plates. I no longer have that many. I have one, and that is just in case I need to use it for something. I held on to one, so I gave away all of those. There was a point where I had 4 5 liter Erlenmeyer flasks, and I think 6 2-liter Erlenmeyer flasks. I've given all but 2 of each of those away. So it's just stuff that I built up over time, I think. I usually buy all of my tubing. This is kind of a lame one, but I buy all of my tubing in bulk because it's so cheap. And I don't give it away because I don't want it. But if anybody runs out, they know they can contact me and I'll just cut them off however much they need, stuff like that. So.
Yeah. So funny thing, I have a stir plate, but what's great is I actually built it out of an old like PC fan and a hard drive magnet back when, hard drives used to come with magnets. And I literally made it out of a PC fan and a magnet. And so at this point in an old Nokia phone charger that was like a 12 volt like phone charger. So I have that one still just because I spent time and energy on it. It's kind of cool looking. Who doesn't want a Netgear firewall chassis running their stir plates? So I don't know. There's the IT geek in me coming out where you're taking apart hard drives to get all that stuff together. But yeah, things. I mean, I'm not going to give it away, but my pH meter doesn't get a ton of use. I know lots of people obsess over pH, and I kind of bought into that for a half minute and then kind of bought out of it a half minute later. So so it's there because I know we have experiments where pH is handy, and if I think about it, I'll do pH measurements. I gave away a lot of my glass carboys, and even PET carboys. Not because they do have value, and I have a small one or two just for some random knickknacks, or maybe if I decide to do a mixed firm thing, I have glass. But honestly, with small children and even in pets and all those things, like carrying glass around just seems like every time I carried that big glass carboy around, I just felt like I was one mistake away from just like slashing my hands open and going to the emergency room. And so I was not a fan of that. I have some immersion chillers that came with various systems. And then once you kind of get a nice jaded immersion chiller, I didn't have use for the old ones. So I've given away a lot of kind of older immersion chillers to people that just needed something. They're not things, they're big metal coils and they take up space. So why not give them away if you're not using it? But there's a whole lot of gadgets that come and go. And so I think really you can find yourself in a trap where you're buying some little knickknack every month, or you can just be content with what you have and save a little time and energy. But yeah, definitely giving away fermenters, giving away a whole bunch of other things. In fact, I've got another fermenter I'm probably going to give away to a friend here before too long, just because it doesn't have the glycol connections that I'm currently using. And so, why let it sit there and collect dust when I have a buddy that'll use it?
Yeah. So Jim was asking more specifically in my reading of his question about little gadgets. And when I hear that, I'm thinking like, fun little things that some smaller company may have invented to kind of to digitize the brewing process. When we're talking about just gear in general, I mean, if you go back and look at some of the earlier articles that I wrote, the experiment articles, I was brewing on, 2 identical propane setups with 20-gallon kettles and all of that was given away. I mean, there are people in my local brewing community who are using gear that built Brulosophy ostensibly. About a year and a half ago or so, Tim and I were having a beer out in his garage, and he mentioned that this guy Tim's a mechanic for Chevy or GM, I should say. And he said, yeah, this one of our vendors comes by all the time. He's a great dude. I mentioned to him, he mentioned that he had heard Tim on the podcast, right? Doing like one of the beer reviews. And I was like, oh, cool. I made fun of him for being a beer celebrity and all that stuff. And he said, yeah, he's going to swing by. He said he made a batch of beer he'd like to share with the two of us. It's awesome. So he comes by the next week, and we're sitting there, and I've got a box of gear that I just no longer use. One of those big, not a box, but like a big black bin you get from Costco, just full of all this brewing gear. So I pull that out, and dude shows up, and we're sharing his beer. It was great. And I'm like, do you want any of this? He ended up taking what would ultimately have been, over $1,000 if bought brand new of all of this gear, most of which I actually paid for. But for me, it was like, this is what built where we're at. I'm not going to try to make $100 off of it, whatever. And now I feel kind of good knowing that this guy's at his place. He's got this killer setup with, propane burners and a big kettle and all of this, making good beer the way that I used to with that stuff because I no longer needed it. So there has been a lot of gear that I've taken in and that I've let go of just because of advancements or changes in the way that I brew. So hopefully that answer suffices, Jim. We have got to get to a quick break. We will be right back with more Brü A.
Got great ideas, but no idea how to build a website? Get Bluehost. Their AI design tool creates high-quality WordPress sites super fast. Whether you're a blogger, influencer, or launching a side hustle, Bluehost helps boost your growth with built-in marketing and e-commerce tools. Upgrade to cloud and get 100% uptime and 24/7 security to stay online all the time. Why wait? You've got the vision. Make it real. Visit Bluehost.com to get started.
There's no denying that stainless steel is the best material for brewing equipment, and Delta Brewing Systems offers some of the lowest prices on high-quality stainless gear, like the Firm Tank, which in addition to holding 8 gallons or 30 liters of wort, comes with a domed lid to even further reduce the chances of a messy blow-off. Plus, it can hold up to 4 psi of pressure for closed transfers. Delta Brewing Systems also has their own line of brew kettles, as well as one of the lowest-priced all-in-one electric brewing systems out there, and their prices are shockingly low. If you're in the market for legit stainless gear that won't break the bank, do yourself a favor and head over to deltabrewingsystems.com today. Have you ever thought about adding a port to your kettle but held off because you didn't feel like drilling into your gear or sending it off to have someone else do it? From the makers of the world's fastest counterflow chiller, the Exchillerator, comes the Hangover, the easiest way to add extra ports to your kettle as well as countless other options. Mount a faucet to your keg for easy portable pouring. Set up the perfect whirlpool arm. Hold a heating element in place. All of this and so much more without permanently modifying your gear. Manufactured right here in the United States, the Hangover offers brewers too many convenient solutions to list here. So head over to Exchillerator.com today to see what the Hangover can do for you.
Hey, football fans, ready to add some extra excitement to your game day? Dive into Chumba Casino, where the thrill of the game greets you every day and the action never stops. It's completely free to play, no purchase necessary. Whether you're tailgating, cheering from your couch, or on the go, Chumba Casino brings the excitement right to your fingertips. Play anytime, anywhere, with hundreds of casino-style games, including thrilling social casino slots and classic blackjack, and new games released every week. There's something for everyone to enjoy. Plus, take advantage of generous free daily login bonuses and a fantastic free welcome bonus to kickstart your fun. Chumba Casino is your ultimate playbook for nonstop entertainment. Make every day a Chumba day and join the action now and play for your chance to redeem some serious prizes. With Chumba Casino, the fun never ends. What are you waiting for? Dive into the action today with Chumba Casino and make your game day unforgettable. Join us at ChumbaCasino.com today. No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 18 plus. T&Cs apply.
All right, time to answer more patron questions. Go ahead and kick us off on this round, Will.
Well, this next question is from Gavin Fisher. Thank you for giving me all the easy to pronounce names, Marshall. I really appreciate it. It's really hard when you give me the rough ones. But Gavin asks, or it says, I've been going down the rabbit hole on making a good hazy IPA and finding out it is a way more complex than I first thought. The biggest challenge I'm finding is getting these strong fruit flavors that I find from top commercial examples. My last beer came out really good, but super astringent at first, like chewing on some hop pellets. It settled down quite a lot, but it was still prominent. I used a majority of Galaxy hops and have since learned that that variety can be quite coarse. My question is, what is it with Galaxy and from what I've heard other Southern Hemisphere hops that can give that coarse vegetal astringency?
Will, I don't mean to clump you in with people like me, but Gavin is asking a question of two people and actually a crew of people here at Brewlosophy who aren't necessarily the biggest, hazy IPA brewers. We brew it because we want to experiment with it and all of that. I've brewed probably 12 myself or so. But asking specifically about Galaxy hops, and I've experienced that hop burn, that kind of fuzzy astringent thing that you get on your tongue from overhopping. I say, you're not using too much, but that fresh kind of hazy IPA hop burn thing. I've experienced that with domestic hops as well. So I don't think it's something that is specific to New World hops by any means at all. I don't know exactly what causes it other than the fact that you're throwing so much at a beer like a hazy IPA that it just takes time to settle down. Now, I did ask a couple of friends of mine, what are you doing who make great hazy IPA, by the way? What are you doing to ensure you're not getting that fuzzy astringent hop burn thing in your beers? And I was shocked with the response from my buddy who makes some of the best hazy IPA that I've had. His response was, we actually let it age for about 2 weeks before we serve it. Now, this is a commercial brewer. And to me, I'm like, that's IPA. You're not supposed to do that. But they're minding all of the other pieces of the process that could be detrimental to that style, namely cold side oxidation. There is absolutely, or at least bare minimum, vector for oxidation or oxygen contact with that beer on the cold side. And so that preserves the beer. They keep it cold, which is going to force more of that particulate, the stuff out of the beer and to settle out before they're serving it. And to me, that really is the key. Now, I've experienced a similar, not as strong, of course, but a similar quality and even clear, West Coast IPA that just has a ton of hops thrown at it. Now, I don't know if that astringency and vegetal should be paired together. I do think sometimes they are, just by virtue of the hop variety that you're using. But I've had astringent beers that are insanely fruity as well. I mean, I just think it's the hop variety. So with Galaxy in particular, I've brewed with that hop many times. I love it, whether in a low hopped blonde ale, I think it works well, all the way up to clear West Coast IPA. I really think it just has to do with the way you're using it and how much of it you're using.
Yeah. So I kind of read this as describing hop burn myself. And, I don't think anybody's going to label me or you as hazy boys or haze boys by any stretch of the imagination. Haze boy Marshall over there. Way to go, guy. But I think that any high alpha hop can be like a hop burn producing hop, especially the high alpha acidity ones. And I've had domestic, I'm with you. It's not a Southern Hemisphere thing. I've had domestic versions that have this kind of hop burn quality to it. And while I do not make a ton of hazy, I have produced at least 2 that had this hop burn. And again, the answer was just let it age a week or 2. And if it's still not doing it, I've read some people like to try to add gelatin or biofine. And I know it seems weird to add fining agents to something that you want to stay hazy, but I do think there are some things that stay in suspension, potentially hop burn causing additions that if you add that gelatin or biofine, it can kind of clump up and knock some of that out a little faster. So yeah, definitely mind your cold side oxidation P's and Q's. If you are doing if you aren't doing close transfers to CO2 purge kegs and then maybe adding a little bit of potassium metabisulfite along the way or some kind of Camden to kind of knock out some of that oxidative oxygen that's in there, do all those things. And then I think age, and then potentially, gelatin or biofine could be your friend if you're trying to knock out some of that hot burn quality. But I am with Marshall. I do love Galaxy. I love super fruity IPAs. In fact, one of the things that I think hazy has done a favor for is really accentuating a lot of these fruit forward IPAs. And then now when you have West Coast IPA, you still get these crazy fruity West Coast IPAs that just happen to finish dry. And that to me has been just an amazing full circle on that.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like the West Coast or clear IPA brewers have learned a lot from the hazy IPA brewers, actually, which is the beautiful kind of symbiotic nature of this hobby, of this industry. A couple of side comments that don't have much to do with Gavin's question, but I feel like I just want to hit on, because why not? Here we are, end of 2024. Let's go off the rails a little bit. First off, the gelatin thing. It is a wonderful, wonderful tool. To me, if you're vegan, vegetarian, you're not going to use gelatin. Some other fining agent may do the same thing, but we know gelatin has this amazing ability to pull particulates out. And I mean, there's a reason that Ray referred to it as powdered time. It really does do in over 24 hours or less what otherwise would take a week or two. And so you can find a hazy IPA. We have an experiment that was brewed by one of the guys that I credit for making hazy IPA popular. Ed Colley doesn't have his blog anymore, but was I believe it was called Ales of the Riverwards, made incredible hazy IPA. He performed this experiment for us where he gelatin fined one and left the other one alone, and they were both still hazy, and the gelatin fined one slightly less so, but had a kind of a cleaner thing. Now, maybe it wasn't a significant experiment, but I was happy with that. Now, here's what I learned about gelatin and fining in general. If you go back to the early days of craft beer, there used to be this kind of push to market your beer as unfiltered. Like that was a big thing. You lose all the goodness if you filter it. Bullshit. I've had filtered beers next to unfiltered versions of it. They taste almost identical. Now, one might leave you less gassy at the end of the night, and I like that, and that's usually going to be the filtered one. Well, that seems to have carried over into chemical filtration, or what we call fining, gelatin being a very common, because it's cheap, way to go about doing that. What I realized as we started doing all of these experiments with gelatin and fining and all of that stuff, what I realized was that the vast majority of people who were crapping on, this idea of fining beer and saying that if you do that, you're stripping it of the flavor and all of that, had never even tried it themselves. I would respond and say, what has been your experience? Well, I would never do that because I don't want to lose all that flavor. It's just a blah, blah, blah. Well, don't diss it until you try it. And when you try it, have you tried comparing it to a version that wasn't fine? That's what we've done. And not to pat ourselves on the back, I'm going to go with powdered thyme over letting a beer that is sensitive to thyme otherwise sit in a keg forever. So I'm with you on that. And for Gavin's sake, I actually think that's a great recommendation that I did not make. So good for you on that one, Will.
We're missing a great marketing opportunity. We need a Brulosophy branded gelatin.
Hell yeah.
It can be the finest cow bones in the biz.
It drives me crazy. And I know this is the case in every hobby. I'm not very deep, but somewhat deep into the sourdough thing lately. And it's the same thing there. Do you autolyze? Do you fermentalize? And if you add salt at this time or that time, you're going to ruin. No, test it out at the very least. Do what works for you. I don't care if you use gelatin or not, but don't go telling people, made up bullshit because you have a belief based on, again, an appeal to antiquity. The other thing that I have to comment on that you brought up that Gavin didn't touch on at all, but this whole, I'm glad the trend seems to be waning here lately, but this whole like Haze Boys, Crispy Boys thing, if there's anything in brewing that has made me cringe, it is that. Oh my God. It's so dorky to me when people like label themselves a Haze Boy. And I believe it's spelled with an I, not a Y, which I don't know if they did that to be inclusive of people who aren't boys. But that's one reason I think it's stupid. The other one is it just sounds dumb. And the other thing, if you like Pilsner, if you like crisp, clean lagers, why is that suddenly a thing we're calling crispy? It just feels so silly to me, but I'm going to get off my pedestal now. And I just wanted to get that out because I refused to use those terms in my day. Do you have thoughts on those, Will?
I'm so glad I could hit that trigger there.
Oh my God, you got me, buddy.
That made me so happy. I'm like, I didn't realize this. I used it in jest because I think it's silly as well, but I just think it's more fun to facetiously mock it than it is to actually like acknowledge what it is.
Yeah,
but yes, it is with an I.
Yeah.
Who knows why? But again, I think we're onto something. We need this Brulosophy branded gelatin, the finest cow bones in the biz. There we go. That's what we need. Somebody out there make Brulosophy branded gelatin a sponsorship opportunity. Let's roll with it.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm with you. So if any gelatin producers out there, Knox, if you want to sponsor us and we could slap our label, I'm all for it. That'll be fun. So, all right, next question. We're going to move on from boys and gelatin. This one comes from Al, I think it's Broth or Brow, Brough, from Sydney, Australia, who says, fresh wort kits are incredibly popular here in Australia. Many retailers offer them and they are a fantastic option for anyone short on time or a bit lazy. They consistently produce beers that are far superior to kit and kilo brewing with LME or DME, that's malt extract, dry or liquid. While many of us brew for the joy of creating something from scratch, I'm curious, why do you think these kits haven't caught on in other regions where kit and kilo brewing is more common for beginners? Wouldn't promoting fresh wort kits to new brewers help them achieve better results and enjoy the process more before falling deeper into the rabbit hole of all grain brewing? Now, just before you respond to this, I want to explain, here in America, I don't think the term kit and kilo is anywhere near as common as it is in Australia. My understanding is that a kit and kilo kit is kind of like the old school, you take some liquid malt extract, it's concentrated, you mix it with some water, you add a kilo of sugar to it to boost up the alcohol, and then you pitch whatever yeast they included with it. Usually, I believe the extract is pre-hopped, so it's pretty easy to make these beers. Whereas fresh wort kit is a brewer is making wort, selling it to a homebrew shop who then sells that to the home brewer. So that's where we're at with those.
Well, gosh darn it, Marshall, this is America. We only use kilos to measure running distances and drugs. That's it. That's all we use it for. Like we can run some 5Ks or we can have Ks of cocaine, but that's all we use it for. That's it. So I don't know what this kit and kilo means, but I'm assuming there's cocaine involved or a run. And either way, I'm not a fan.
The kilo is for sugar, your booger sugar. I don't know if you know what that means.
Oh, hey. We got the sugar. All right, we're gonna ride the lightning. I got you. So fresh wort kits, at least in my area, and when it would have been useful to me, like it's not something that I'm very familiar with at all. I mean, I know of the idea, and I really kind of like the idea, but it's just not something I've actually been exposed to because I don't think you see that as much here in the States, at least where I'm at. It's not something that I've seen. I I do think it's a great idea, though. I'm all for saving time and being lazy. Those are two of my defining characteristics as a brewer, minus this whole philosophy thing that gets in the way. But yeah, so I would totally be worthwhile to, like, you know, you could steep it with some character malts if they gave you kind of a pale wort to work with. You could do all sorts of things with it. And I would imagine if you got wort from a professional brewery, it's probably better quality wort than you're going to get from some of these LME kits.
Yeah.
You know, between the LME and DME, I'm kind of a bigger fan of DME and then using character malts to kind of give it whatever it is that I want with steeping grains. But I haven't done that process in a long time. But, you know, other than saving time, I do think that brewing a bag is still a really easy and cheap way to get into the hobby. You know, just doing a little stovetop burner with, like, you know, 1 or 2 gallon you know, kits worth of, you know, grain, and just kind of going through the process. I'm pretty sure that in as little as 30 minutes, you could make your own wort using a brew in a bag. And, you know, and while the saving time does appeal, I think, again, brew in a bag is a pretty baller, nice option. That's, a pretty easy way to get into all grain. But, you know, I do kind of wish we had fresh wort kits around here. I think that'd be a pretty rad thing to try out and do some experimentation with.
Yeah, like you mentioned, I've heard of people who like these breweries who are really trying to encourage homebrewers, you know, and they'll have days where they'll make a 7-barrel batch of wort, and, you know, if you show up and participate in the homebrew club meeting that day or whatever it might be, that they're going to send you home with, you know, 5-6 gallons of fresh made wort from there. And I think that's awesome. Here's the thing. I feel like we have to pay attention to cultural differences and the motivation behind why people do certain things. A little story here. I was talking with my daughter the other day, my youngest daughter, Olive. She's 11 years old. And, you know, her older sister, Hazel, is really into baking and loves to bake, you know, sweet goods, cookies and such from scratch. And she has fun with that. And, you know, she's really inspired by, and, you know, her older sister's a role model. She's inspired to want to do these things. And she brought up making brownies. And I said, oh, you know, Mom and I made these amazing brownies. We found this recipe online. And she looks at me and she goes, why didn't you just go buy, you know, Duncan Hines from the store? Why didn't you just buy the box? And I said, because you can do that. But usually when this is what I'm explaining to my daughter is, you know, if you're doing that, it's usually because you just need to slap together a quick brownie recipe, you know, for while watching football or to take to work or something, you know. But really making brownies means that you're getting all of these ingredients and you're putting them together and you've got your hands in the whole thing. And I feel like, at least for the homebrewers that I know here in the States, that's why they get into homebrewing. It's not just to have the beer, or, you know, just to take that beer somewhere real quick. It's because they want to have their hands in it. They want to create something. And usually, you know, my brother's a perfect example of this. He made a couple of batches of beer based off of my recipes before he started designing his own recipes. And he got lucky because they ended up being pretty damn good. But that's the next step is you know, I've got all the ingredients. I'm doing this from the bare minimum, you know, aside from, you know, malting your own, you know, growing and malting your own barley and growing your own hops and stuff. But that having you know, being completely entrenched in the production of this consumable product, I think is why most of the people that I've talked to do it. And so by buying fresh wort, you're basically eliminating all of the production part of the process. You're just fermenting it. And, you know, where's the uniqueness in that? And I'm not dissing fresh wort kits. I think this is the mentality a lot of Americans have. And why it probably hasn't caught on over here is because for us, homebrewing is just a hobby that you do. We can easily, I'm going to go do it today after this. I'm going to run to the store and buy the latest mix pack of, you know, Firestone Walker beers because we're going to be watching football all day. And that's what I want to have on hand. When I'm brewing a batch, though, it's about more than just the consumption. It's about the process. It's about being embedded in it. And I wonder if that's not, you know, the kind of the difference in, and maybe it is a cultural thing. Maybe I'm way off on that, but that difference in understanding is, yeah, if I could go down and buy 5 gallons of fresh wort, but all I'm doing is pitching yeast and letting it sit, you know, in a bedroom or a closet or something, and then going through with the part that's kind of annoying for me, which is packaging and cleaning, you know?
Yeah. So how many kilos of brownies does your recipe make? I'm just curious.
There's a lot of sugar in it. I'll tell you that.
I kind of get what you're saying, but, you know, he's coming from a beginner, and I think, you know, maybe not so much today, but I think back a little over a decade ago, like the common way for beginners was take this LME or DME kind of kit, and the brewer's best kits you get off the shelf, they're still there, and I do think that fresh wort to start off with would be kind of a better starting point, at least for better quality ingredients, maybe than starting off with like a brewer's best kit that has been sitting on the shelf for a long time. So nothing against Brewer's Best. If you get them fresh, they can make some pretty passable beers. But I do think like getting a fresh wort kind of thing might be a better gateway to beginners. But I'm with you. I think a lot of reasons people want to do all grain specifically for brewing in America anyways is control. We're all about control, which is why we're not so big onto like big tasting menus at restaurants, because we want to be able to tell them we don't want this thing, we do want that thing. And so that's why we will have things like BJ's Brewhouse with a tomb of a menu instead of going to places that are fine dining that just serve you whatever they want to serve you. So
true.
It's all about control. We're a very control oriented culture with our lack of kilos of things. Anyways, Christian Forstall writes in, on that note, I can't for the life of me understand why a brewer might opt for a cereal mash when cereal cooking seems to work just as well. I like brewing with flaked wheat, but where I live, it's about twice the cost of pale base malt. Yeah, those kilos of wheat, man, they get to you. Whole wheat berries are relatively inexpensive, though, about half the cost of said base malt, and I can use them for baking sourdough. Win-win. When brewing with whole wheat berries, I pressure cook the heck out of them one night before, which is technically cereal cooking. In the morning, they're a congealed glob at the bottom of a well-loved Instant Pot. Oh, man, I love my Instant Pot. I could have kilos of those things. It'd be great. God damn, dude. I hand blend this glob with an immersion blender, then add it to the mash with the rest of my malts. I'm getting the same extraction as I would with flaked wheat and have been satisfied with the results, which is most important. But am I missing something? Any insights or experience you can share that might make me tweak, update, or change my process? What do you think, Marshall?
Okay, so for people listening who maybe are unfamiliar with the idea of a cereal mash, Christian is right that all a cereal mash is you're taking grains that unflaked or unmalted, oats, wheat, even barley, really. But no one's doing that because we have such ample access to malted barley. And you are essentially creating a side mash where you mash this cereal with a little bit of, milled, malted barley to activate the enzymes to start breaking down those starches so that you can then throw it in to your full mash, and that will then be open to conversion and all of that stuff. Now, here's the thing. I've done that precisely once in the 20 plus years that I've been brewing, and I'll never do it again because we have access to things that don't require it. What Christian is talking about is, why would somebody do that when you can just cook the cereal grains the way that you would to eat them, and that does the same thing. I looked into it. I don't know if it does the exact same thing, but from my reading, it basically does. And so I don't think it matters which one you choose. You may have much more knowledge on this, Will, than I do, but I think the reason people do that, one main reason is, again, the appeal to antiquity. That's what we've learned works, so might as well keep doing it. Also, a lot of people don't cook cereal grains nearly that often, so might as well just stick with what works for brewers in the first place. If I'm not going to be eating this cooked, wheat berry mash or mush, whatever it is, then I might as well just do a quick cereal mash and use it for what I'm intending to use it for. So I think it's a good question, Christian. I don't think people are thinking about it as deeply as it sounds like you might be.
He had me at congealed glob. That's all I know. Like when he said congealed glob, I was hook, line, and sinker. But no,
sounds like something.
I was like, how many kilos of congealed glob can I get at the end of this? But I don't have any experience or much experience with wheat berries. If I'm being really honest, I don't use a ton of flaked wheat in beers either, so it's not really something I go after. But that said, it's working for you, and I'm with Marshall. Everything that I've looked at says that it's equivalent enough, and you're getting kind of, a very similar thing. And so if you have a lot of this ingredient and the time restraint of doing it the night before and just blending a congealed glob like fits in with your brew schedule, then I would say keep on keeping on, man. If I had just kilos and kilos of wheat berries lying around, I might do the same thing. So the only downside I see to it is just the whole needing to do it the night before. And, I usually, if I was going to use something similar to this, I would use flaked wheat, so I wouldn't have to do a cereal mash, and I would just throw them in my normal single infusion mash. But again, for as much as I used, flaked wheat and stuff like that, it's really not a something that I've thought about, at least not near as much as you have. But thank you for letting me use congealed glob in a sentence multiple times today, because that's really special.
Yeah, you've used it a kilo of times there, buddy. So
okay.
So, and again, just to be clear, if you are using products like wheat and oats and even rye, there are malted versions of all of those, which are great. And those are ready to be used in your mash, and they're malted. So there's an element of self-conversion that they possess, right? The diastatic power. If you're using flaked versions or torrefied versions of any of those cereal grains, those are ready to be used directly in your mash. They won't do the same exact thing as the malted versions, but they are prepped and ready because they've been gelatinized already in some way, that those starches have been gelatinized. What Christian is referring to is taking in essence, the raw grain and preparing it for use in a way that benefits the mash, or at least does what we expect from those grains. I think in this day and age, it seems to me, and I could be wrong on this, but it seems to me that most brewers who are relying on those grains in their beer are using it for either flavor, which in that case, I think they'd probably go for the malted versions, or for some other impact like we discussed, I believe it was last week, like oats. You're using it for body, for mouthfeel, and for foam retention. You would typically use a flaked version for those things. You don't need to cereal mash it. You can, you absolutely can. But when you could just go buy some oatmeal, at the store and toss that into your mash and not have to worry about it, I think it's just easier. I don't know how many people are actually cereal mashing or even worrying about cereal mashing in this day and age with the availability of the grains that we have for us. So I don't want to minimize, what your approach is, Christian. I think it's awesome that you're still kind of tapping into that, what I would say is more of a traditional approach for prepping those grains. I'm just saying that with what we have available to us, I don't know if it's something that a lot of people are actually, even considering this day and age. So, all right, next question. And this is an interesting one. I can't wait to spend a few minutes talking about it with you, Will. Our good friend, Eric Pierce, a patron, longtime patron, regular, a contributor to when we ask for questions. He's always on the monthly video chats and hangouts that we do for our patrons. He had a question that I'm going to admit up front kind of stumped me. He says, I've heard tales of something called a round trip mash that is purportedly done to create wort with maximum fermentability. I've always thought if you could do the alpha acid rest or alpha amylase rest before the beta amylase rest, you'd get the best results. However, the beta enzymes would be sufficiently denatured during the alpha rest. I guess they don't renature when temperature goes back down. So how are they doing this? Exogenous enzymes, bringing the temperature back down and adding fresh beta amylase? I've read that gluten-free brewers do this, which is understandable given the types of grains being mashed there. I hope you can shed some light on this. And before we respond to this, let's just go over real quickly beta amylase and alpha amylase rests. If you're going for that lower temperature to increase fermentability, Will, what amylase rest are you doing there?
So beta amylase is the more fermentable, more shorter chain sugars, and from all the things that I have, your peak kind of range for coaxing out that beta amylase is around 140 to 149 or 60 C to 65 C.
Yeah.
And it begins to rapidly denature around 160 Fahrenheit, which I'm so sorry I didn't write that down in Celsius. But it survives to some extent up to 167, although it doesn't do so much there. Alpha amylase, which is a little less fermentable, but is active at a higher range. It's usually in that sweet spot around 149 to 158 Fahrenheit or 65 to 70 C, and it rapidly denatures around 170 F.
Right.
Which also, I'm sorry, I didn't write that down in Celsius for some reason. So sorry to our Celsius using folks. I'll put that on my kilo-long list of things to do. But so anyway, so you have these two kind of sweet, and so that's why when we do a single infusion, there's kind of a sweet spot that's kind of more around that 150, 152, because you're still getting, that alpha and beta amylase activity in those kind of single infusion sweet spots. Now, to be truth, Eric, I have no clue what a round trip mash is.
Neither do I. I'm going to just say it up front.
I Googled it. I Chat GPT'd it. I came back swinging and a miss. I did my Google food to try to figure it out, how it does with gluten free, and that didn't help me out very much. So if you can provide some clarity, I love you, brother. Please give me some clarity, and I'll chat with you all day. So while I don't know what process, again, that 146, 156 Fahrenheit is kind of that sweet spot for a single infusion. We're on the upper end of beta and lower end of alpha. So what I would suppose is that if you're worried about denaturing these things, you're talking about heating it up. So I would suppose as long as you kind of kept your mash at around 160 degrees Fahrenheit and then let it cool off, you wouldn't completely denature all of your beta amylase in doing that. So if you started at like 158 to kind of get up in that alpha range, you would still have enough kind of active beta amylase. So once you kind of got back down to that sweet spot, it would still keep doing its thing. But again, without knowing a little bit more about what's going on here in the question, that's about as good as I got.
So as I mentioned, I have no idea what a round trip mash is. Not only have I never heard of that prior to Eric asking this question, in all of my 20 minutes of Googling, trying to find something so that I could kind of sound like I knew what I was talking about to answer this, I found nothing. In fact, what I found were like blogs that had nothing to do. When I would Google, round trip mash brewing, it'd be blogs that were like, around the world to taste beers, like round trip trips. Like there was nothing about it. So I don't know where you're hearing this from, Eric, and I want to know, and I'm sure you will tell me in a couple of weeks on our next video chat. But it sounds like what he's referring to at the very least is maximizing fermentability by activating both beta and alpha amylase at these different times. And so what I do have is a little bit of personal experience with intentional reductions in mash temperature. So like you mentioned, you already went over all of the temperatures that are going to be where these different enzymes are most active. So I'm not going to cover that. What I've done before is I've started a mash in the middle of winter. I did this very intentionally, by the way. I did it in a stainless kettle, not in my insulated mash tun. I started it at 158 degrees Fahrenheit. Again, I apologize for not having the Celsius for that, like you will. Started it at 158, left it in my 45, 50 degree Fahrenheit, that's like 10C garage over an hour, and I let it drop from that 158. It got all the way down to about 144 degrees Fahrenheit, which is pretty much lower than even the lowest end beta amylase, if that's what you're going for, that type of a mash rest. Almost down there anyways, pretty low. So you would expect high fermentability. And my understanding, the reason I tried that was I wanted to see, is this wort going to be higher FG because of that start at the 158 degrees Fahrenheit in that alpha amylase range? Is it going to be higher FG, or is it still going to be highly fermentable the way you would expect a beer that you just mashed consistently at 146 or 148 degrees Fahrenheit? That's going to be more fermentable. Lo and behold, it was highly fermentable. So this whole idea about the denaturing of enzymes, it's absolutely true. But like you mentioned, alpha amylase is going to denature at a temperature that's still a bit higher than 158, than my starting point. So as long as you avoid that, my understanding is that you're those alpha and beta amylase enzymes, as long as you're back into those temperature ranges where they're most active, they're going to be active regardless. In the typical mash temps that we are using for beer, for most beers, if we just say 150 to 160 F, both of those enzymes are going to be active on some level. It's whether or not they're more active or not, right? And again, all these enzymes are doing is chopping up those long chain sugars into fermentable sugars. For me, it did create a very fermentable wort. The question I have though is, did I even need to? Did the 158 degree Fahrenheit mash rest have any impact on that fermentability? I don't think it did, because it fermented the way that it would have fermented had I just mashed at 144 Fahrenheit the whole time. So that's been my experience. I don't know why. I guess the essence of what I'm trying to say here, Will, I don't know what a round trip mash, if that's what we're going to call this, would accomplish compared to just holding it at the specific set temperature where you want your FG to end up in the end anyways, where you want your attenuation to be.
So to give him the benefit of the doubt, he did talk about gluten-free, and they're using some weird things like malted rice and things that I don't really have a ton of experience with,
Right.
to be honest. And so there could be some little component in there or some wrinkle that I'm just not privy to, and that's okay. But so there could be some weird malted thing that I don't understand. But overall, without knowing what a round trip mash is, I think we cover that as best as we can. So I'll segue on to Dave Roberts from New Hampshire, who has maybe my favorite question of the day. Best for last there, buddy. What's your favorite cheese specifically for a cheeseburger? Please explain.
Well, Dave, nice trying to keep me to just cheeseburgers because I love cheese. Do I consider myself a cheese aficionado? Of course not. But I love cheese so much. I think it was one of the best things ever invented by human beings. And so I will answer the cheeseburger question, but I'm also going to riff a little bit on cheeses in general. I cannot stick to a specific type of cheese that works for cheeseburgers in general, because I feel like cheeseburgers are such a broad food item, right? So last night we went out to eat, and I ordered a burger that was a chicken burger. So it was just a chicken breast, really, it was a teriyaki chicken burger, right? And so it had teriyaki sauce, it had pineapple, lettuce, tomato, mayo, all of the goods. And the cheese that they use for that is Swiss cheese. And I feel like that is the perfect cheese for that kind of a burger. And so that was my favorite for that style of burger. If we're talking about just your standard run-of-the-mill American cheeseburger, I'm of the sort that actually likes American cheese on that. I feel like it adds what I expect from that style of a cheeseburger. My wife, on the other hand, thinks that American cheese is basically plastic, which I know is a shared belief by many out there, and she refuses to eat it, so she'll order it with cheddar cheese. That's her and she loves cheeseburgers more than I do. One of my favorite styles of cheeseburgers lately are smash burgers, and I feel like personally, if you're not going to go with American cheese, which is the number one, in my opinion, for a smash burger, then pepper jack is probably my next favorite on that list. So as burgers go, and I want to hear your thoughts on that. As burgers go, I'm American cheese, Swiss cheese, and pepper jack cheese, though I've had Gouda on a burger that was amazing, and that was I've had blue cheese burgers with mushrooms that are phenomenal. I think it's just specific to the style of cheeseburger that you're making personally. As far as eating cheeses go, if you put it in front of me, I don't care how stinky it is or how neutral it is, I will eat it. I love cheese so much. So
I think we're going to be in some similar agreements here. So one of my favorite kinds of burgers out there is the smash burger. In fact, I bought an entire Blackstone griddle just so I could make amazing smash burgers on it. And I'll take like Wagyu and make like these little 3-ounce balls, and I will smash the crap out of them on there. And then what do I top my really expensive Wagyu meat with? I top it with trashy American cheese.
you got to, man. You got to, right?
Because it just it melts perfectly. And then when you put it in your mouth, you get like this really melty, perfect crunchy from the Wagyu and like that fattiness. And it's like so rich and delicious. And it's like, I just feel like for a smash burger, for a good old fashioned, you just need that American trashy cheese. And I know I don't even know if you can call it cheese. I'm not even sure it is. Yeah. I do a little bit bougier. I don't do the singles, the Kraft singles. I usually try to buy like an actual American cheese that you would either have to slice up or it comes pre-sliced, but it came from a block. But honestly, I think you have to have that with a smash burger. Now, when we get to the bougie burgers, as I call them,
there you go.
Then you have to do a little bit more thinking. And, there is nothing wrong with, I like a sharp cheddar on just about anything. In fact, I can sit here and just eat cubes of sharp cheddar cheese because I love it. Mm-hmm. I think sharp cheddar is great. I think Colby Jack's great. I could use Brie in some applications on a cheeseburger, and I can make a really good quote for that. I think provolone is another one that I can make a good case for putting that on some burgers. Yep. I'm not the biggest Swiss fan. It's just not my favorite cheese, but there's nothing wrong with it. A cheese that I actually really love, both in its younger and aged forms, is Gouda. And I think Gouda goes so good on anything, especially if you do like a nice burger with an egg and some Gouda.
Oh my God, brother.
I am so in on that.
Let's go.
Exactly. But I'm with Marshall. I like cheese, and I like a lot of forms of cheese, and I even like stinky cheeses.
Me too.
The blue cheese and like Asiago burgers, those can be really cool too. And so I think for just the plain old smash burger, even if I do my bougie version with Wagyu, I want trashy, melty American cheese. But then for the bougie burgers out there, the sky's the limit. Just whatever pairs well with it. I think that teriyaki burger sounds amazing. I think putting something like, a mix like Colby Jack cheese or cheddar with, something that's got like an avocado burger makes a lot of sense. So it's kind of like, really, at the point when we get to bougie, we just got to pair the cheese with the burger and kind of make them all all meld together. But you can shower me with kilos of cheese any day, Marshall.
I don't want to stop talking about this. So there's a thing about American cheese that I understand the hate that it gets, because it is a very weird texture, right? So Tim and Michelle, our neighbors who review beers and stuff with us, they got me onto Kraft Deluxe, which is like their high end American cheese, which I think they just cut it thicker is all it is. So you actually just get this like real gooey American cheese character on burgers, and it's phenomenal. But you think about, that flavor and that texture, is it going to work with, we made these burgers one time that blew my mind. It had pepper jelly on it and instead of like ketchup and mustard, grilled or sauteed mushrooms, and you imagine that, and the burger had all kinds of different seasonings. It was more of a Mediterranean type of seasoning in the burger, and it was on toasted bread. It wasn't on, these weren't on buns. You imagine American cheese on that. And to me, even just the thought of it clashes, but you put a nice blue cheese, we made a blue cheese sauce that we put on there. Oh my God, did it work good with that cut of the pepper jelly, and just, oh my goodness gracious. American cheese doesn't work with that. So I can't have a favorite, but that thick American Deluxe on a classic, even a frozen burger patty, if you're just in a rush, it changes everything. To me, it makes it great. I like it better than cheddar on those types of burgers. But then you go to say something like a barbecue burger where you're, grilling up or even frying onion straws or something like that. The American cheese doesn't work as well. I want a sharper cheddar that's got a little bit more bite to it. And to me, it works better on that. So I think it really does. We're moving into burgerlosophy territory here, obviously, but that's my say. Like you, man, Gouda is so Gouda, and I will eat Gouda all day long. We have a local place, a local-ish place in town called Bravo Farms that has this smoked Gouda that whenever we're driving out to the Central Coast, we'll stop there and just pick up, it's like $10, but you pick up this little snack pack and we just snack on it on our way out to the coast. And it's so freaking good. And then we have we're talking about smash burgers. We have another place in town that we were just introduced to. I don't even know how new it is, how long it's been around, but it's called Hammy's. And their whole thing is smash burgers, and they're really reasonably priced. So if you live in the Central Valley of California and you're driving through Fresno, stop by Hammy's. It's phenomenal. They have a couple locations, and they have a jalapeno burger and they put pepper jack on it, and it works so well. Their classic is American cheese, and it works phenomenally well. So I'm with you on the smash burger thing. Anything else on cheese, Will?
Oh, if we're going to give shout outs. So one of my favorite places in town to go get a burger is called Last Place Burgers. I mean, their slogan is "We tried." It's fantastic. And it sits outside of one of my favorite spots to get a beer in town, which is Roadmap. And their burgers are so good that, and I think, and I've talked to the owner a few times, and he uses Wagyu, and it's just a food truck, but he uses Wagyu, and he's gone out of his way to kind of research things. And so he has I think it's called the OG, where it's just he literally mixes mustard and ketchup. He has the smash burgers, the trashy, American cheese with Wagyu and these really nice buns. And it's the best thing. It's he just calls it the OG. You're this is just amazing. Just a little bit of mustard, a little bit of ketchup, some Wagyu, crispy all the way around. Every bite's just this nice crunchy piece of Wagyu. Everything's made to order, and it is my absolute favorite spot to go and have a trashy burger while I drink some really exceptional beers at the brewery adjacent. And it's so good that my kids beg to go there.
Nice.
They're where are you gonna go? It's let's go to Roadmap for dinner. And you're of course. Why wouldn't I want to go to one of my favorite breweries in town for dinner and eat delicious cheeseburgers? It's amazing.
That's awesome. So I have one last question then, since we're on it, and this is the last question of the last Brü A of 2024. When you're making your own smash burgers, I'm very particular about how I top my smash burgers. When I bought a Blackstone for the same reason, just to make smash burgers, as well as fried rice actually. But smash burgers was number one. When you're making them, obviously you're going to top them however the people you're making them for want them topped. But for yourself, what's your approach to topping your smash burgers?
So rule number one on the Blackstone is that if I'm going to fire it up, there's going to be an onion cut up in a corner, diced, sliced. That's just going to be like caramelizing.
Okay.
Like it's like a rule. Like if I'm going to do this before I even fire it up, I've already sliced an onion to like start caramelizing onions. So for me personally, I like to have, the only I'm going to have, the buns are going to be toasting on there too. Like, you're going to either put, usually just butter and let them sit down there and get a little brown and warm. And so I will take two 3-ounce patties. I'll smash them. And then after I flip and salt them, and then after I flip them, I'll salt them again, put a little American cheese on them, just so the cheese gets melty. And then I'll double stack it, put it on the bun. And then I'll put that little bit of caramelized onion and maybe a little bit of mustard. And then that's all I want. Okay.
So here's where I'm a nut. If I'm making smash burgers, which it's a process, it's different than just throwing a couple burger patties on a grill or a smoker. You're smashing them and you're kind of making sure that they get crispy on the edges and all of that stuff. I'm going ultra traditional by making smash burger sauce, which I believe I haven't made it in a while, to be honest, but I believe it's just mustard and relish, and dill relish, by the way, not sweet relish, which I like both, but for smash burgers. And I won't put ketchup on there. And I'm a ketchup and mustard fiend. I love that stuff on when I go to In-N-Out, they do their special sauce, which is just Thousand Island. I will ask for ketchup and mustard in addition to the special sauce. So like, I'm not against that, but for smash burgers, it's a toasted bun, like you said. It's grilled onions. I do the same thing. If I'm lighting up the grill or the griddle, I'm doing other stuff on there as well. And onions are 99% of the time. That's what it is. That with mushrooms too. But for my smash burgers, I'll put some onion on there. I'll have my 2 patties, very, very thin 3-ounce patties with American cheese on both, with a little bit of lettuce, tomato, and a good, tablespoon of the special sauce, which again is just the mustard, regular old French's, yellow mustard with dill, pickle relish out of the jar. And oh my God, there's something about that matchup that is just perfect to me. And I know my wife's like, why aren't you putting all the other burger stuff on there that you normally do? I'm like, I don't know. There's something special about it this way. So,
but smash, you just want the crunchiness. That's it. Like the crunchiness of the stupid like meat. That's all you want is that crunchy wonderfulness. And to me, Texas is very mustard centric. If you go to Whataburger, which is a Texas chain, and you just order a burger, it's going to come with mustard. And so we're more mustardy. Although I do think a little bit of relish might add to that. So that's pretty amazing. I want to try it.
I'm telling you, look up smash burger sauce next time you make smash burgers and just, try it once. And if you don't like it, you never have to do it again. It changed my perspective of the simplicity of a burger. I believe the traditional smash burger actually doesn't have onions or anything on. I think it's burger, lettuce, and just this sauce. That's my understanding. I'm telling you, it works, and simplicity sometimes comes through. So with that said, that is all the time that we've got for our 360th episode. Huge thanks to all of our amazing patrons for supporting us and submitting questions. I've said it recently that if you're listening to this show now and you're not a patron, you have our patrons to thank for it. We would not be here without them. And that's why we like to prioritize their questions in these episodes. I certainly had a blast answering them. How about you, Will?
Again, these are my favorite ones. Thank you guys for all of the both brewing and non-brewing related questions. It's always a joy.
Absolutely. If there's anything you'd like for us to address in a future Brü A, please send your questions to feedback@brulosophy.com and make sure to indicate that it's for Brü A in the subject line so that we are sure to add it to the list. Again, if you really want to have your question answered sooner than later, become a patron over at patreon.com/brulosophy. And don't forget to check out the Brulosophy Show, where host Martin Keene is creating some truly amazing content. You can find it at youtube.com/@thebrulosophy Show, or just search YouTube for Brulosophy and you'll find it there. Finally, make sure to head to brulosophy.com to keep up with all of the fun beer and brewing stuff we are up to. The Brulosophy podcast is made possible by the generous support of our sponsors as well as all of our rad listeners. We seriously could not do this without you. Cheers to everyone who has subscribed and left a review of our show. It makes a huge difference. If you haven't yet, please consider doing so. Head over to brulosophy.com/support to view a list of ways you can easily help us to continue producing this podcast. If you want a reward for your support, visit patreon.com/brulosophy. Thanks again for listening. We'll be back next week with another episode of the Brulosophy podcast. Until then, think beer.
Start off the the morning with some hot tea. Lemon and honey, cause it suits my bro. Put some herb in the bowl, yeah, it's homegrown. Ain't gotta go through the middleman no more.